everything's the same, right? We use the same paint, we use the same flooring, we use the same lighting, we use the same everything. And that commonality with the team that's trained really well, makes us really efficient. So we don't have to waste time asking questions. Everybody knows what their job is and they know what we need in terms of materials and how we operate.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. If you're getting some great value and enjoying this show, do me a favor, right? This is going to be important to help us, but also help other listeners find the show. Leave us some honest feedback. Give us a rating and review. All right. That's really important for not just me, but all podcasters, right? We got to hear from our audience, but also get that feedback. It helps us fine tune the show and also helps other people find the same success that you're finding from this podcast. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button. All right. And we got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Ed Mathews. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button today. Now, Ed Mathews is a seasoned real estate investor and the founder of Clark Street Capital. With over a decade of experience, Ed built a portfolio of multifamily properties in Connecticut and the Southeast United States. Now, his journey was far from direct. For over 24 years, he worked in Silicon Valley, and now he is a recovering Silicon Valley executive focused on multifamily investing. Let's welcome to the show, Ed Mathews.
Thanks, John. Nice to meet you.
Absolutely. Ed, I went over your bio at a high level. I did not mention that you're also the host of the Real Estate Underground podcast and obviously the founder of Clark Street Capital. Why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of the gaps that I missed in your bio?
So I spent, as you said, about 24 years slinging software and services all over the country and in some cases all over the world. And I got to the point where I had 2 little girls who I never saw, and I wanted to have an impact in their lives. And so along the way, starting in like 2011, I started to build very slowly a small real estate portfolio where I bought a 4-family, we would flip a couple of houses, take that capital, buy another multifamily, rinse and repeat. And I did that for the better part of 7 years, to the point where there was kind of an epiphany and an inflection point that happened all basically at the same time, where I realized I didn't want to travel 150 nights a year anymore. And the real estate portfolio was throwing off enough cash flow where I didn't need to. And so I resigned. I left the company I was working for, a company called DocuSign, and gave them my 30 days on January 2nd. And February 2nd, I started off full time at Clark Street Capital, and we've been doing this ever since.
I love it, man. One, congratulations on making that transition, right? It's a story that we love because it's one of the reasons people get excited about real estate. It's definitely one of the reasons I got into it, right? You were a busy dad. You had your 2 girls, you're traveling on the road 150 nights a year, missing some of those key moments, right? And I know that kind of eats at you as a parent. But you started investing 2011, building up this small portfolio over the course of 7 years. You realized, you know what? We actually have enough passive income coming from our real estate portfolio. Well, I don't need to work anymore, at least not in this role. You left that company, focused on, kind of the company you created, Clark Street Capital, and you've been doing that ever since. That's the dream for a lot of our listeners, right? We have a lot of passive investors who are listening to the show right now and active investors who maybe have a small portfolio and are trying to figure out how to scale, right? How do I get to the point where, like you, I can walk away from my W-2 job? As you
Right.
reflect back on that 7-year journey, right, from 2011 to 2018, where you were able to leave that company, what are some of the key insights or key steps you took that made that possible?
So one was money discipline, right? We lived on, my wife is very frugal. She's an accountant by training. And We never lived high on the hog. We always underbought our cars and underbought our houses, and we ate pasta and chicken instead of steak and lobster, and all that, right? And so, we both grew up in very modest households and never broke the habit. And so, over the course of time, we would build up a little bit of cash. I would get a bonus. She would get a bonus. I would get a commission of some sort, and we take that capital, pour it into some sort of real estate investment, let it mature, and then cycle it. Usually that meant selling it, taking that capital, and going and buying something bigger. And it's interesting because I'm actually doing that right now as well. I'm selling all my little teeny properties, teeny being anything under 20 units, and I'm trading up. So, I feel like I heard cats. We were talking before we started recording. I feel like I heard cats for a living, and so part of that is that you manage 25 different buildings, and you're running around with your hair on fire all day, and it's wonderful. It turns out this real estate investing thing, it's hard, and there's nothing passive about actively managing a property. And so the whole idea here is to from where we are in our inflection point is to trade up, sell off a whole bunch of smaller assets, take that capital and trade up into a much larger set of buildings. So instead of managing 25 buildings, we're managing two or three. And hopefully more we'll be able to add units as we make that transition. But the thing that one of the key insights that I took away from that first 7 or so years is I did it wrong. I think I believe that I should have raised capital way earlier than I did. I didn't start really raising capital
You
like
believe
friends.
that now, or you believe that then?
I believe that now that I should have done it then. And so, the thing is that I can't really, I don't really recall my motives for not doing it. I think probably one was fear. The fact is that if you if you don't understand the response, if your hand doesn't shake when you're signing that mortgage or that purchase and sale agreement, you're kind of failing to understand the magnitude of the responsibility you're taking on, right? And so I think part of it was fear that I didn't want to take on any more responsibility in terms of other people's money. But the fact was is that we found some screaming deals in those days, and it would have been really cool had I shared those opportunities with other folks, because we would have been able to grow faster. And so, missed opportunity, but I think our portfolio as a company would be much larger had we started bringing in investors sooner. So,
And
that's
I love what you said, man, and I want to unpack it and split it up into two conversations because I think it's really powerful for a lot of our listeners and even myself included. The first thing, though, you talked about to make that transition from 2011 to 2018, it required money discipline, right?
yeah,
Not living high on the hog, kind of keeping your costs down, living below your means. That comes from the house, that comes from the car, that comes from the meals, right? So you're saving as much as you can there. You're taking those savings, even when you get a bonus or pay increases, you're not going out and shopping, you're taking that and then you're using those funds to invest. And it's a very simple strategy, right? Simple in theory, harder to execute, but save as much as you can, take those savings, invest in assets. As you're acquiring these assets, trade them up. When you create enough equity, create enough value, take that asset and trade it up for a new asset, right? And then if you want to buy something after that, use the income from those assets to make that investment, right? That goes back to the rich dad, poor dad principles, right? But that was the first thing, right? Of how to make that transition. And I think it's really important because sometimes we get so focused on like, oh, I need to scale, I need to buy bigger properties, I need to do this, I need to do that. And we miss kind of the core fundamental. And I will tell you, for every successful real estate investor I've ever met, particularly those who, if you want to call it, built it from the ground up, right, bootstrap themselves, this is a very similar common theme, right? You start off by saving your own money, buying something and growing and scaling and kind of gritty, grindy nature. You get there, right? And then you started to say, you did that in 2018, you launched Clark Street Capital. But as you reflect back, you say you kind of waited too late to start raising capital. You mentioned the fear, right? The fear of losing capital. Your hand shaking when you're signing those loan docs. It's kind of a fear that makes you stay focused on what you're doing, right? Make sure you double check all those things and your hypotheses and your underwriting. And I think that's a really important thing to have. So many people are hesitant to raise capital, and many of our listeners would love to be able to raise capital to grow and scale their portfolio, but they're fearful that they're going to lose someone's money. How did you overcome that fear?
So I think part of it was a mindset shift, and in fact, most of it was a mindset shift. In that, I realized that I was pretty good at protecting my own money in terms of buying cash flowing properties from day one. Right? We weren't buying on the pro forma; we were buying on what it is today, and then staying really disciplined in terms of not deviating from that model. And then when we went in, you know, we have a very specific process that we use to take over a property. A lot of the properties here in the Northeast are the Class C properties, in particular the value added properties that we take over. They're very old, right? They're late 1800s, early 1900 vintage properties. And if the landlord, I jokingly tell people that, but there's truth in it, in that we basically buy crappy apartment buildings from landlords who suck at their jobs, right? And so our first pass is clean and safe. Let's make sure all the MEP, mechanicals, electrical, plumbing is all clean, safe, and operating. And then we upgrade the common areas, and then we upgrade the units and the exteriors. And over the course of a 5-year hold, we've turned it into a really nice building. Um, but that doesn't happen overnight. And so, the whole mind shift of that was that, we were scraping and scrimping to make that model happen, right? Because a lot of it, we would buy the property to take it down, and we would borrow some money to do the transition, to do the clean and safe, and the MEP clean and safe, and as well as common areas, and maybe one or two of the units, and then the rest of them we were doing out of cash flow, and that was hard, right? And so, had I like the building we just bought, probably about 8 months ago, we raised, real good deal. It's a smaller building, it's 7 units, real good deal. We bought it well. We raised plenty of money to upgrade everything that needs to be upgraded. And we landed, and basically a tidal wave through that building, and changed that building in a matter of about 6 months. And it's a profound effect on the building, it's a profound effect on the neighborhood, it's a profound effect on the human beings that actually live in the building, right? Because they go from hating their or disliking the people that own the building and manage slash mismanage it, right, to now having someone that they start to trust, that they have their best, somebody in terms of our company who has their best interests at heart, because our interests are actually aligned now. Because here's the thing, I figured this out a long time, relatively long time ago. If we come in and we make a building clean and safe, and we repair the relationships with the residents, at least the relationships that can be repaired, right? And the ones that can't be repaired, make it easy for those folks to leave, right? We're not looking to bust jobs. Um, Give them nice recommendations, clean slate, off you go. Uh, the As we upgrade, make the building clean and safe, upgrade the common areas, upgrade the building units, people start to be proud of where they live, because it becomes a very nice building. And here's the cool part: when people are proud of where they live, they stay for a really long time. And when they stay for a really long time, that saves us money, because it saves us money on turns, it saves us money on lease ups, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And so it makes the building cash flow better. And it also makes the building more valuable, because the NOI is improved. And so it's good for the residents, in that it's they're living in a clean, safe place where they are proud to live. They then tell their friends who live in the neighborhood that this is a clean, safe, well-run building. So when units do come open, I don't have to, yes, we advertise and yes, we work with realtors, but a lot of times the next resident that moves in is a friend of the person who lives in apartment two, because we've built a brand around that building, and they know that the building that is on Chestnut Street in ABC Town is a really well-run building, and the folks that own that building actually care. And so it allows us to compress our vacancy rates down to well below 5%. So we're usually
Yeah,
in the high threes, low fours.
you just mentioned something that I think is really a great strategy and one that is kind of overlooked by many investors. I think most investors recognize, hey, we're going to do a value add strategy. I'm going to come in, renovate the units, push rents to X, and we're going to make this, right? What gets lost in that is the why and how it works, right? Which is by creating, a higher quality of living, by improving the neighborhood, improving the community. People want to live in a safe and clean environment. That's what they're looking for. And if you're an attentive landlord, property management company, you're going to handle their issues. Well, that's what they want, right? People get disgruntled when my faucet's been leaking and no one comes out to fix it. If something's broke and no one comes out to fix it, or there's a problem I have, no one seems to care. That's when you get disgruntled residents, right? And that goes back to the point of, if you can address those issues and concerns, then people tend to stay longer, right?
Yep.
Because they want a home. They may not necessarily be in a position to buy their house, whether that be for, financial reasons or logistic reasons, they may be moving, whatever it is. They still want a place that feels like home. And if something's broke, they want it fixed. And if you can demonstrate that you're that kind of owner, that's going to allow you to retain these residents. It's going to keep your costs down. You're going to be able to charge more for in rent. And guess what? They're going to want to refer friends, family, other folks to come stay in a community like that as well. So really great point on, it's not just about renovating the units and putting in granite countertops and, stainless steel appliances. Sure, we can make it look pretty, but are we also making it safe? Are we also taking care of the concerns that they have? Are we also making sure that we address any maintenance requests? That's going to do wonders for you as an owner as well. You said a couple other things though. One, you said MEP a couple times. Can you explain what MEP is for those who aren't familiar with that term?
So it's an acronym for mechanicals, so HVAC, so another acronym. So that's heating, ventilation, AC, air conditioning. E is electrical, P is plumbing.
There you go. So that's that. You also said something earlier that I thought was interesting from a strategy standpoint. You said you like to buy crappy apartments from owners who aren't good at their job. And I think it's also smart as an investor to figure out what your sweet spot is. What's your strategy? How do you know this is a deal for you? Certainly, there are numbers that are going to indicate that, right? But when you are setting your criteria, when you're exploring it, it helps to have a sense of what kind of deals you're positioned to take down. For you, it's older, crappy apartments. Part of that is driven by where you live, right? So you're in the Northeast region, lots of older properties there. So you know that there's certain things that need to happen. We talked about the MEP, right? The mechanicals, the electricals, the plumbing. These are big ticket items that many investors don't want to fix, particularly in that smaller kind of multifamily realm, right? If you're buying a 5 unit and you got to replace the mechanicals and electricals and the plumbing, that's going to scare off a lot of investors, right? So you're in a position to come in and say, oh, we can handle that. And because we can handle that, we can create more value. We can buy this at a lower basis, right? A lower price, and we can create this value, and then we can create a clean and safe community. So it helps so much to have a very clear strategy and a value proposition of how you want to approach the business. Talk to me about kind of how you came to that realization. Was this more something that you fell into, or did you recognize early on that, hey, this is something that we're pretty good at and we should kind of focus on these kind of properties?
So I think part of it was informed by our flipping experience. The fact is that we were taking on projects, and some of these projects were pretty gnarly. So it got to the point where unless it was functionally obsolescent, right? You have to walk through the bedroom to get to the living room or there's a spiral staircase in the middle of the bathroom, or it's dumb stuff, right? But they're out there. Um, we avoided that stuff. But the fact is that if unless there was a fundamental structural flaw, we were able to fix the property. And so very few properties scared us off. And so we took that single family philosophy of, I don't care that the foundation has some sill problems, or that the walls are out of plumb and really need to be rebuilt, or that the support system really is starting to falter and we've got to fix that. Doesn't matter to us. We know how to fix that stuff. And so that part of it became really easy, so that when we came into situations with larger buildings, the 5, 10, 15, 20 unit buildings, and then we saw similar issues, it scared off a lot of our competitors. And we looked at that and went, it's actually not that bad. We can fix that. So that gave us a competitive advantage.
Yeah, I love that, right? That's a key insight. Where can you have a competitive advantage? For some people, it's location. So for some people, it's their own experience. In your case, it comes down to being able to take on projects that might scare away other investors. Gives you a competitive advantage to do deals, to get great opportunities that other people are going to miss or pass over. Let's go back to the raising capital aspect, right? So you mentioned that, hey, it took some time to get comfortable with that, to kind of get over that fear of losing someone else's money. Talk to me about the first time you raised capital for a deal. What was the deal like? Who were the investors? What was your relationship with them? Walk us through that process.
So first deal I did with my uncle and my two college roommates. And so it was a loan-based deal to start. Eventually, as we move forward, I actually converted that loan to equity to let to share in the growth of the building. Helped us with cash flow, and they got to participate in the growth of the building and the value of the growth of the value. And so we were, basically what I did was I provided them an opportunity and said, look, we're buying the building here. The market is going, it's a steady. So Connecticut is not a hyper growth market, right? It's a very steady, very, very predictable market, both in the single family and in the multifamily space. It tends to be a cash flow oriented market, not necessarily an appreciation market. So if you can grow cash flow, you can grow value, right? You're not going to get, it's not like Phoenix or any of the Sunbelt states or anything like that, where they're just growing, organically because of the supply demand curve. It's different here because the multifamily stock is so entrenched, and they're not building a lot more right now. So they're starting to, but back in like 18, 19, 20, they really weren't. And so we're able to, very predictably look at a building and say, okay, these rents are two, three, four, $500 below market. The reason they're below market is because the common area is in rough shape. The units haven't been updated since the 80s. The boiler needs to be redone. It needs a brand new roof. None of the windows work. All the stuff. The parking lot's shot. Um, and knowing what we knew from a construction perspective, we were able to figure out exactly what it would cost to bring that back. And then it's simply math, right? It's okay, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? And so we were able to say, okay, if we're buying a building for X and we have to bring in Y amount of capital to get it to the point where we can start to charge near market rates, if we do charge those near market rates, what's the building worth at that point? What's that spread look like? If it's a good return, if it's a 12 to 16% return over a 4 or 5 year time frame, that's a buy, right? And so it really comes to it really comes down to it's a basic math formula.
Yeah, so you talked about you said your uncle and two college roommates, right?
That's right.
So you have these relationships, you start with a loan, kind of convert it to equity, and then really work on your buying thesis to show them, hey, it's pretty much a simple math equation, right? Here's what I think the numbers are going to be. Here's the projections. And at some point, you obviously converted that loan to equity. Just going
We
back to those initial conversations.
refied, and instead of returning capital to them, they said, hey, we want to buy in, and said, okay, so then I'll give you percentage of the equity instead of giving your money back.
Oh,
So
you're nice. See how nice you are. So that's a great insight right there too, right? Like if I'm understanding correctly, you had a loan, implemented your business plan, created the value. You went and refinanced it with the more traditional lender. Your plan probably was to cash out those investors slash lenders, your private investors, to say, hey, you let me borrow 100K, whatever it is. Here's your profit plus your 100K back. Thank you. Instead, they said, hey, man, well, we see what you're doing now, and I'd love to participate in some of that. So instead of just giving them their money back, you kind of kept it in and allowed them to partake in the upside, right? So, great opportunity there. And I think a couple lessons learned on how to do that with those investors starting out, first time you're taking on money. What did you have to do to get them on board? I mean, did you have a presentation? Did you just show them the numbers? Did they know you were investing in real estate? Were you full time at this point?
I was full time. And so when I left Silicon Valley, a bunch of my colleagues were like, "Hey, we want to invest with you." And I said, "No, no, no, no. Hang on one sec. Let me go break stuff. Let me go do this full time for a while. Let me go blow stuff up. Let me make mistakes. Let me fix those mistakes, and then I'll start coming back to you." And so before I even went back to those folks, I started with folks that knew me, liked me, trusted me, and so that was step one. um, the presentation, I treated it as if I didn't know them. And I gave them an offering memorandum as if it were, if I were meeting you for the first time and saying, okay, here's an executive summary. Here's what we like about the project. Here's where we think the risks are. Here's how we're going to manage those risks. And, here's all the detail in terms of our research behind it. And I'm going to give this to you. We're going to have a cup of coffee and talk about it. And then you're going to go away and read it in detail. And you're going to come back with questions. I'm going to answer those questions. And if I answer them to your satisfaction, I'd like you to invest. In that case, I think it was $50,000 each. And um, we had that conversation, three of them, and all three came back positive, and we moved forward.
I think there are a few little lessons, right? So I want to break this down for those folks who are looking to raise capital for the first time, or maybe you've raised capital but fell a little bit short on your goal. One thing you said was you didn't start off by, begging or, trying to convince people to invest with you, right? You actually turned people away to say, hey, you know what? Let me figure some of this out first. You started people who had the funds to invest, had the means to invest, but already knew you, already liked you, already trusted you, but they also saw that you were already committed, right? You had quit your W-2 job to do this full time. So you were all in. You had clearly demonstrated that this was the thing you were focused on, but you already had some wins too, right? You built up enough passive income in real estate to walk away from W-2 job. So you had the confidence, but you also had the credibility. When you approached those individuals, you shared the information. You were very professional with it. You gave them the chance to review the information, review the business plan, and sit with it, ask their questions. It wasn't a hard sales pitch, no pressure, right? You gave them a chance to process that information and come back, and then ultimately they all move forward with that investment. So, a couple takeaways for our listeners. One, it always helps to be in a position of leverage, right? To have people who want to invest with you, but not necessarily need their money. That's always going to make it more comfortable for you where you're not feeling like you're up against the wall. Two, focus on building your confidence and credibility. Take the time to learn your market, understand your business plan, know your numbers, know the sub market, know your contractors, right? Have all that stuff really tight. So when you're talking about the deal, even if you've never done a deal before, you can still go through the process to get these quotes, get the bids, analyze the data, analyze the market. So make sure that you are building confidence based off of the work, not just blind hubris. Put in the work, right? And then that credibility for you, you had experience, you had a track record. If you're a newer investor, you don't have that track record, you don't have that credibility just yet. One, what success have you had in corporate America or your commercial, not necessarily commercial real estate, but corporate America or your other job experience? But then also your team. What partners do you have? Do you have a coach or a mentor? Do you have other people that you can lean on who do have that experience or that knowledge that can help guide you through that process, right? That's going to be absolutely key. So, really appreciate you taking a minute to just kind of walk us through how you raise money, how you got comfortable doing that to kind of set you up for, raising money for some of the larger deals. Talk to me about your business today. It sounds like you're still raising capital for these deals. You've got a network of investors now. Talk to me more about kind of where you're at today.
So right now, our company is in a pretty big transition space. We're selling off a huge chunk of our portfolio. Um, and we actually already have. We've sold probably about 140, 150 units at this point.
Wow.
Uh, we are in search of, in fact, I've got a couple of buildings. I'm negotiating on one, and one is under contract down in the Carolinas, much larger buildings. And the whole idea here is here in Connecticut and predominantly in the Northeast, the the large buildings, the 7,500, 200 unit buildings, they don't really exist here, and the ones that do exist are family or institutionally held, and they're not getting sold, right? They're getting passed down. And so really the only way to break into that market is to go outside this market. And so we liked what we saw in the Carolinas in terms of population growth, in terms of diversity of jobs, in terms of job growth, in terms of the overall economy down there. And so, we've gone all in on building relationships in North Carolina in particular. And so we've been, working with property managers and a couple of key brokers down there to identify some deals. And so our plan right now is assuming this initial project in the Raleigh area happens, we'll take that deal down. That's a 75 unit building, and we'll plant a flag around that. And we'll probably buy 300 to 400 units around that building, and then we may stay in North Carolina, and move to one of the other cities, one of the 5 large cities in North Carolina, or we may look at somewhere in the Midwest or elsewhere. But I believe that the reason we were successful in Connecticut's is a state, right? 3.5, almost 4 million people, but I live directly in the middle of the state. I can be in Rhode Island in 45 minutes. I can be in New York State in 45 minutes. I can be in Massachusetts in 45 minutes. Right. And so, covering the state here is easy. And so the whole idea of buying in Connecticut and building a team that would be able to service buildings, regardless of where the building was in the state, is really straightforward. So building that team was really important because then they knew our standards, right? They understood how we operated, how we expected them to treat our residents, what color paint we used, what type of luxury vinyl we used, what type of cabinets we used, who to call for granite countertops, all of that stuff, right? And when you do that, when you create a pod around a particular property, like we're ultimately going to do down in the Raleigh area, you get the same benefit, and that is that the handful of people that operate under the Clark Street umbrella, I don't have to tell them every time what needs to happen. I hand them a scope of work, which is identical to the one they got 6 months ago from the other project they did, and with obviously the nuances of the particular building, but everything's the same, right? We use the same paint, we use the same flooring, we use the same lighting, we use the same everything. And that commonality with the team that's trained really well, makes us really efficient. So we don't have to waste time asking questions. Everybody knows what their job is, and they know what we need in terms of materials and how we operate.
I love it. So as you expand to the Carolinas, definitely be more opportunities for you and the Clark Street Capital team. One thing that jumped out to me is just listening to you talk about your systems and processes. One, understanding where you're centrally located in Connecticut, being able to touch the state within 45 minutes to get from either end of the state. So to have your team trained, understand what you're looking for, how to get from here to there, but also some tactical things like what kind of paint color we use, what kind of flooring we use. Make sure everyone understands what the playbook is for renovating these properties and taking over and implementing your business plan and setting the standard. I think that's true for any entrepreneur. If you can focus on building the right systems and processes, it makes it a little bit easier to scale. I'm sure some of this is lessons you learned back in your tech days, but certainly applicable to real estate. For folks who want to learn more, they can go to your website, Clark Street Capital. That's going to be Clark ST. So clarkst.com. They also can check out your podcast, Real Estate Underground Podcast. We'll make sure we put a link to both of those in our show notes. Right now, Ed, we're going to transition to our round of insights. Are you ready?
Let's go.
Ed, give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
So my pregnant pauses, I've had so many, it's hard to pick one. So I'm gonna pick one. I'm not gonna name the company, but there was a point where I was a brand new manager, and I was positive I was the smartest kid in the room. And what that meant was I had all the answers, which put me in the unenviable position of having to have all the answers. And it destroyed the morale of my team. B, it made my life really, really stressful. And and ultimately I failed as a manager, and I didn't get fired, but I was demoted, and I deserved it. And the reason being is that you can't. It taught me, one of the huge lessons that experience taught me was, um, first off, ego's a real thing, and you got to pay attention to it, and you got to check yourself on a regular basis. B, if I am the smartest person in the room, we're all screwed. So we got to take care of that. And then also, the fact is that a team of people can move a mountain where an individual, can only move a rock, right? And so, if you are, one of the things that I've learned from the mentors that I've had over the years, and in fact, one of those people was somebody that I was working with that saw me blow that opportunity, threw an arm around me and said, okay, look, you're going to get another opportunity at some point in your career. Here's what you just did, and here's what you should do going forward. And was very kind and generous and helped me through it. And I didn't believe him at the time, but eventually I listened, and eventually I believed him, and I'm grateful to this day. And so, it's, but the fact is that, the inclination of an entrepreneur is to get out of my way. It's faster if I do it myself, and you're wrong. It's okay if someone on your team is going to do it at 90% of your capability. And it's okay if they make mistakes. It's okay, because mistakes are simply opportunities to learn. That's the way human beings learn. That's the way our brains work, right? You don't learn from successes. You learn from mistakes. And so that's something that in my late 20s, early 30s, that lesson I really needed to learn. And I'm glad I learned it then and not in my 40s or 50s, because it would have been devastating to a career. 28 years old, 30 years old, I was able to come back from it. But that was a hard lesson.
I appreciate you sharing that. Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
So I am a geek when it comes to using technology. I'm starting to mess around with AI. I don't think it's quite there yet, so I'm not going to give you the AI, open AI or Gemini spiel. I'm a big proponent of very simple, easy to use, elegant technology, right? So we use a tool called FlipperForce, and it is and I have no affiliation to it whatsoever. I have no relationship with the guy, but he's put it together. So we used to use this for our flips. It did a couple of really nice things. One, it organized our projects in terms of where we were in each project. It also allowed us to organize our costing in terms of the bids that we were receiving, as well as our own internal estimates. And then it also helped us manage the projects from a Gantt perspective, and timing and making sure contractors were coming in and out as they were supposed to. Super simple tool, but it's elegant in the way that it manages it. We use it to this day, and we actually use it for our apartment buildings as well. And I have yet to find a product that helps real estate investors, people like me who buy crappy apartment buildings and fix them up and then release them out into the wild. I've yet to find a tool that is more functional than that one. And if there are, I'd love to hear about them, but that one's a really good one. It's like $30 a month. I mean, it's worth its weight in gold, and I use it every day.
Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Wow, great question. So I read Oren. So I'm a big reader. I read Oren Klaff's book, Pitch Anything, and thought it was absolutely brilliant. So he is a private equity guy, and what he really understood is I saw a couple of weeks ago. It goes around once or twice every year about how Jeff Bezos hates PowerPoint, and here are the 19 reasons why, right? Um, and what Claff talks about is the way that humans understand, right? The way that humans take in information and how you can prepare a presentation, whether it's a coffee meeting or it's getting up in front of a conference room and having a conversation, or getting up in front of a room of 2,000 people and having a conversation. It provides a playbook that I find, as a real estate investor, as a technology executive, as a salesperson, as a marketing person, as a real estate investor, someone who has to get a message across to another human being and have that person understand what I'm talking about and be able to then synthesize it and get enough information out of me to be able to make a good decision for them. It's a really, really, really good book.
Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
Most of the people in my life would not believe me, but I actually swear to God, I do this. I meditate every morning.
All right,
And
meditation.
one of the reasons I do that is I am a high intensity, high energy, high stress kind of guy, right? And so if I don't do that, I'm also I have a profound case of ADHD. So my mind is always going, 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 going. And I use meditation to kind of slow me down and be able to focus. And, anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes, it's the first thing I do every morning. It allows me to take stock in me and my body and my brain, allows me to take stock in what I'm going to do that day. And usually the next step of that is I create my big three, the three things I'm going to accomplish today. And, it just gives me a moment, and it's not that long. It takes me about 20 minutes to do the things that I do. But in that, 15 to 20 minutes, it basically sets up the entire day.
Love it. All right, two more questions for you. One, give me your number one insight for scaling a multifamily portfolio.
So I don't know how to run a growing business without business systems. And what I mean by that is you should have a checklist or a standard operating procedure for everything you do. And the reason being is, I'll give you a great example. So last April, I took my daughter out to sushi. So me and my daughter Maggie are the only two people in our house who eat seafood in any way, shape, or form. And so every once in a while, she'll say, "Hey, you want to go grab?" And yes, let's go grab some sushi. It's a great place right down the street from us. And living in Connecticut on the shoreline, there's opportunities for really good seafood. And so we went there, had our lunch, and that night I started to feel not great and thought, "Oh no, my favorite restaurant gave me food poisoning. I'm never going to go back there again." And turns out I didn't have food poisoning. I had appendicitis and my appendix burst. And so 24 hours later, I'm in the operating room, and the doctors are working their magic on me, and turns out I'm okay. But here's the thing. I was down for 8 days, gone, right? My wife, so I drive my wife crazy, God bless her. I was on the gurney waiting to be taken to the operating room with my phone in hand, negotiating the final details of a mortgage 5 minutes before I went into the operating room. And when I got back, my phone was gone. And I was like, "Hey, where's my phone?" And, the nurses are like, you're going to have to ask your wife. And so I was disconnected from the world for 8 days. And here's what happened. So I expected to walk into my office and have 1,000 emails and a whole bunch of angry tenant residents and a whole bunch of angry contractors. And what I walked into was all the bills got paid, all the residents' requests got handled, all the contractors were happy and paid, projects were on time, more or less. Everything happened the way it should happen. And two realizations. One, systems worked. Two, oh crap, they don't need me anymore. Okay, that's a good and a bad thing, right? But what it showed me was now I can take my time and focus on working on the business as opposed to in the business, because the folks that work in the business, they got to handle. They don't need me. And that was a huge revelation for me. And it's what inspired me to start to sell off all the smaller buildings and start to grow this. And in fact, we've kind of done two things. We're buying much larger buildings, and we started a debt fund as well, a private equity fund. So, we're doing those two things in parallel. And the only reason I could do that is because my team they have it handled. They're great.
I love it, man. Well, you mentioned that sushi restaurant. I'm glad. Well, I shouldn't say glad. I'm glad you can go back to the sushi restaurant. Obviously, happy that your appendicitis is taken care of and everything is fine now. But speaking of restaurants, give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Uh, so I would say Mikado, which is the sushi restaurant. Um, and in fact, I'm just going to say Mikado because it's a really cool place. The food is excellent, and it's also it's a great place where I've made some really good memories with my youngest daughter. So
I love it. I love it. We'll make sure we link to that in the show notes. I loved our conversation, Ed. You talked about your journey from Silicon Valley, realizing that you were missing a lot of time with your daughter. So I know that's the theme of kind of the conversation, right? That was the spark, but also kind of the end right there as well with your daughter in the restaurant. But you talked about how that really pushed you to say, let me start investing in real estate. Start by building up a smaller portfolio, getting it to the point where after 7 years you had enough passive income to walk away from your W-2 job, eventually started partnering with other people, starting with your college friends and your uncle, eventually bringing on more investors, growing kind of the portfolio, now transitioning and focus on North Carolina and having more opportunities to kind of grow and scale with this debt fund. So loved hearing you talk about kind of how you scaled this business and some of the challenges that you faced, particularly overcoming that fear of raising capital, working with other investors. I think that's something a lot of people can relate to. So appreciate you sharing more about your journey there. For folks who do want to learn more, again, your website is clarkst.com. Your podcast is Real Estate Underground. So check out that podcast. And if you're interested in buying properties in Connecticut or maybe being an LP investor on stuff in the Carolinas, make sure you reach out and see if Ed's got something that he can work with you on. Again, thank you, Ed, for being a great guest and coming to Multifamily Insights. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and I hope you have a great day.